My bad, y'all. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. Thank you for waiting patiently while I got some tech stuff figured out. Um, it's good to be with you again. I'm looking forward to this discussion today. We're going to, this is really, I think, a good supplement to the discussion that we had on Friday with, which was just impromptu, but Hiram Rivera stopped by, Renee Johnston, Jared Ball, and Orasami Burton. And in that conversation, Orasami Burton read out a statement from Daruba Ben Wahad that was written in 1977. And I think it's an important political statement from Daruba. And, it certainly, some people ask why it was read, and I can't speak for Ori with regards to that, but I think that one of the things it speaks to is part of what Hiram Rivera was talking about in that conversation, which was that there are many different ways and many different groups of people that want to attach themselves to Assata Shakur's legacy, right? And we could talk about that a little bit today. But in addition to that, a comrade who listens to the show, who's actually, a peer, like from Asada's generation, certainly, reached out to me and said, "You should have Thandisizwe Chimurenga on because in her book, which let me pull that up in a second here. Some of us are brave. Volume 2. Here we go. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I do have to apologize too for being behind on multiple conversations really with Tandi about her work, because unfortunately they all came out in like the end of 2023 and 2024, and at that point I was just not even reading because of everything with the genocide and all of that. And so I owe this work more in depth, than what we're going to be able to get to today. Why did I do that? Tech is still spicy. And but this book, right, which is the second volume of 2 volumes, which are composed of work that Tandi did on her radio show, right? And I'll let her speak to that a little bit more. Um, that the first piece in part 2 here is a piece from Assata Shakur. And we also have, because Thandisizwe has played it over the Root Work program that is on Black Liberation Media. We also actually have that audio that we can share with folks that people can go and listen to themselves. We'll probably play a little bit of it today, but the full audio of the conversation is available, or at least the portion that's transcribed. I think there's actually a little bit more to it than all of that. And so it's just a nice supplement and a nice additional conversation to have. And so let me introduce my guest and bring her up here to join me. And so we can get a little bit deeper into this. All right. I'm all over the place today. Thandisizwe Chimurenga is an award-winning freelance journalist based in Los Angeles, California. She is a former assistant editor of the LA Watts Times newspaper and a former reporter and co-anchor for Free Speech Radio News and the KPFK Evening News on Pacifica Radio. She has been a commentator for Hard Knock Radio, a daily public affairs show for the hip hop generation heard on KPFA Radio, which is Pacifica in Berkeley, and has been recognized as a champion of national news reporting by the San Francisco BayView Newspaper, Block Report Radio, and the County of San Francisco, as well as New America Media for outstanding reporting on health and healthcare. There's more to it than that. She is also the author of No Doubt, The Murders of Oscar Grant, which was independently published in 2014. There's the book that this discussion is, which is volume 2 of Some of Us Are Brave: Interviews and Conversations with Sisters in Life and Struggle. And then there's also a volume 1 of that. And then in addition to that, she co-authored a book, What We Stood For, the story of a revolutionary Black woman with Deborah Jones. And currently, she is the host of Root Work, Getting Down to the Roots, a show of analysis, news, and interviews, which can be heard both on KPFK in the LA area and also on the Black Liberation Media platform. So without further ado, Tandi, it's good to be with you. Uh-oh, you're muted.
I started to say it's good to be with someone who is also tech spicy. But yes, good to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I mean, like one thing that I would say too is that of all the folks that I've spoken with so far, you followed in many ways along a kind of political trajectory in terms of the political ideology and things like that that Assata Shakur embodied and took up. And so I wondered if you could just start by saying a little bit about, you know, what your reflections are on Assata's passing, and kind of what she meant to you on a political and a personal level.
Definitely bittersweet. Absolutely bittersweet. I cried. It wasn't an ugly cry, but I did cry, actual tears. I cried, whenever someone's mother passes, it hits me. Losing your mom, you're not gonna, there's nothing that can prepare you for it. My heart goes out to Kakuya and her family. So knowing that, it just, I know it hurt. I cried for me personally, that I never took myself down to Cuba to interview her in the journalist role or to meet her as a comrade, an elder in my struggle. I cried because I'm selfish. I like the idea of her walking around on planet Earth, even though she was 78 years old. I like the idea of her being here with us physically. So there was that, and of course, just the general mourning. But I also rejoice. I have to rejoice because they didn't get her. She was 90 miles away. And no matter how they tried, they could not reach out and snatch her. She was free, even though, there are online debates about what is free. She was able to see and touch and love on Kakuya and her son-in-law and her grandbabies. They were able to see her. They were able to visit her. So yes, she was away from her family, but her family was able to see her. She talked many times about how she missed New African or African American folks and our culture. But, she would get visitors. She was kept in the loop. No, she could not come back here. But she also was not locked up for decades and then released to die within a few months or a year. She was not subjected to hell in prison, which shaved off years of her life. You have to rejoice around that part of it. It is absolutely a victory for the movement. So it's absolutely bittersweet. And, again, with the personal and the political, this is a woman who is a part of, an elder of the New African Independence Movement, of which I am a part. So of course she's a mentor. Of course I looked up to her. Of course I identified with her and appreciated her. And she has left us a tremendous body of work, a tremendous record. Still want her here with me. Still selfish. I said, how long? Well, she was 78, Tiny. How long did you want her? Forever. I wanted her to live forever. And technically she is. Like you all said, she's immortal. Next time I'll be a little bit more precise with my requests. I want her to be here physically forever. But okay. All right.
Well, that's beautiful. And yeah, I remember you saying, I felt like with the passing of Sanyika, you also used the term selfish in
I
thinking
want
about.
them here physically.
Yeah.
And they've left a body of work for, I don't care. Like I said, I never took myself down to Cuba. Don't know when I was going to get to Cuba. It don't matter. I like knowing that she's around, walking around that island, enjoying the sun, swimming in the waters. I like knowing that she's able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a few years ago there were rumors, I remember, that she had passed, that was circulating a few years ago,
Hmm.
and it brings me a lot of joy also thinking about that, just about sort of the idea that they thought, oh, maybe she's gone, and she still was hanging out for a little while,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of that. I do want, because I know different people are coming into these conversations now that maybe haven't taken the time to learn that deeply about Asada's politics. Maybe they
Hmm.
know the image, maybe they wrote the book. Could you say a little bit about, the new African independence movement and her relationship to it, or that movement's relationship to her, both?
Well, of course, I want to recommend to folks that they read Edward Onasi's book, Free the Land. Read Imari Obadele's original book, Free the Land. Read the book on the Shakur, well, the Shakurs, an American Family with a K, by Santee Elijah Holly. The New African Independence Movement, reading Sanyika's book too also. The New African Independence Movement seeks self-determination for Black people within the United States of America. We see ourselves as a colonized nation, an actual nation, not a mythical or imaginary nation, but a nation that has an actual land base, that land base being the southeastern portion of the United States of America, where the majority of Black people have been since we were brought here to these shores, where we remain, where we developed a unique identity, a unique relationship with the land and with the Native Americans, a unique culture. And even as we migrated away because of economic and social terrorism, white terrorism, to parts of the Northeast, to the West Coast, like my people did coming out of Arkansas and Alabama, we maintained that culture that was developed in the southeastern portion of the United States. And so we say that fits the criteria of a nation. We knew that we were a nation long before the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, that says everyone is entitled to a nationality and has a right to struggle and bring that nationality out from under colonial rule. So the New African Independence Movement in 1968 identified 5 states of the southeastern U.S. as part of a reparations demand. We are owed reparations for over 200 years of slavery, or excuse me, enslavement, of forced labor with no pay. And after quote unquote enslavement ended, Jim Crow, redlining, discrimination, terrorism with lynching, everything up till right now today that has continued to happen to us. We are owed for all of that. And you really can't put a price tag on it. But in addition to a monetary payment, technology, land, it can be forms of reparation, just like policy can be. And so, as part of that reparations demand, 5 states of the South were identified, and it was named New Africa, just like you have a New England or a New York or New whatever else, New Africa, because we recognize we are an African people and we are entitled to self-determination on this land. We've had discussion with various Native American tribes and nations. They cool with it, we cool with it. That is the movement that Assata was a part of in the late 60s, early 70s. Many members of the Black Liberation Army, not just along the Eastern Coast, but out here in Los Angeles also, with Geronimo Jijaga Pratt. Not only did their allegiance stem from the Black Liberation Army and fighting for Black people, it was about that political objective of freeing land and allowing Black people to be self-determining.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you laying that out. And I know there's a lot folks can delve into within your archives. There's also multiple conversations within our archives that I can, include in the show notes, including the conversations that I've had with you and with Yusuf,
Yusuf, yeah.
and others. James Jacques Sales is another book. His
Mhm.
Meditations on the Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon and other writings, which also lays out a lot related to New African political thought.
And that
Um,
that book right behind you, We Are Our Own Liberators.
yep,
Jalil Muntakim talks about it also.
yep, yep. Um, so let's put some context into what we're going to engage with from Assata today. And so, you know, there were there was the statement that Orasami read, right, which was remarks that Daruba was making in 1977. Daruba also put out a statement, and I know that Jared Ball read it during Saturdays with Renee. So if folks want to go check that out, he read that aloud there. And this discussion, I think, is we should frame up what this is, right? Because what we're talking about is a conversation that happened between her and comrades, right?
Hmm.
That she wanted to share with other new African women who were also a part of a political organization and a task force within that political organization, to
Hmm.
get reflections from her on the history of struggling as a new African woman or as a Black woman within revolutionary organizations. And also, I mean, in the piece, she's not just talking about like the Panthers or the BLA, she's talking about different organizations too that were going on in the 1960s and some of her experiences with them. She even says at one point she hesitates to name names because she doesn't want to, like, it's not for that kind of purpose. But say they want those experiences, and they're thinking with in the current moment that they're in, right? So in 1993, when this meeting happens, about, okay, well, how do we move the struggle forward from where we are now? And so that's a little bit of what I would offer. What's important for you in terms of like bringing this, about this discussion and framing it out?
So the discussion was a delegation of sisters in the New African Women's Task Force, which was part of the New African People's Organization, traveled to Cuba. I was a member of the organization at that time. I can't even remember why I did not make it to Cuba. I'm trying not to kick myself too hard. It was 1993. It's over with. It's done with. Tandiwe, let it go. But they traveled to Cuba and they asked for an audience with Assata. And she not only consented to that, they asked could it be tape recorded. She consented to that. And I was given the tape once folks came back. And so, again, between sisters, comrades in the struggle, they wanted to hear from her directly. What were your experiences? And what do you think? What insight can you lend to us? And I don't know if you can pull up the page one. Are you able to, or do you?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do
So
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the question that was posed to us: since you are considered to be an important leader in our struggle, what can you tell us about X, Y, and Z? And the first thing out of her mouth is, "I don't consider myself an important leader," because when you start thinking that you're the leader, you start acting crazy. And so just her acknowledging that the narcissism that exists and being humble, staying true to her nature as being humble, right? And then after she gets that introductory remark out the way, she begins to talk about her personal experiences. I appreciated her talking about being a gopher.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if people actually know what that meant. Um, I didn't catch that at the time when the publisher sent the book back to me. But a gopher, as in a go, Go, for, FOR, go for, as in a person who go for this, go for that, go get this, go get that. So a gopher, a person who goes for stuff that you call on to do little menial tasks. That's how she started out. That's how a lot of us start out. But she makes a critical distinction. She says people thought it was her biological destiny to be the gopher because you're a woman. You're not fit for leadership, or you don't have this experience, or you don't have this knowledge. There was actually an organization in the 60s. I'll name names. Assata didn't name names. I believe it was the Congress of African People that talked about the man should naturally be the leader because his knowledge of the world is more vast and expansive. When Assata says, I'm not going to name any names, I was like, why you ain't going to name no names? I was able to put it together. And, even based on the research I did for the other book, What We Stood For, Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, which I co-wrote with Deborah Jones. You know the names of the organizations, the US organization, Congress of African People, quite possibly even the East, which was a formidable organization in Brooklyn during that time period. But yeah, she talks about organizations where the woman was supposed to bring a bowl of water for the brothers to wash their fingers, just madness, crazy madness. But it was also, someone's warped interpretation of what we used to do in Africa before our development was arrested, before that violent arresting of our development, before colonization and enslavement. But yes, so she talks about how people would think it was her biological destiny, how when it came time to talk about leadership, they never considered the leadership to be female. It was always male. And after what you have on the screen, after being seen as a gopher, comes the tag of being a good sister. And I think that that's something that has continued to live on in a lot of organizations and a lot of attitudes. Well, what's a good sister? A good sister is not one who's going to challenge men to be accountable. Women also, but we're talking about the culture and the ideology of patriarchy, which is what she was talking about, which we didn't really talk about a lot during that time. All the sisters experienced it during the late 60s and 70s, of course, prior to that, but I'm talking about Assata's era. They all experienced it, but they either didn't know what to call it or didn't want to call it out because of fear of backlash. So those were the things that she talked about. The good sister is the one who's not going to challenge accountability for males in particular. We'll fight the oppressor. We'll fight the police. We ain't got no problems fighting the police. But now when we question brothers in the organization, now we're a problem.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I found
let me jump in real quick. I should have said this in the beginning. My understanding of why Ori read that letter from Deruba is because there was a discussion about whether or not Assata's autobiography was able to encapsulate or incorporate her full political ideology for publication reasons. And so part of the letter talked about the fact that white women, or the women's movement, either wanted to rally around her or tried to claim her simply because she's a woman. And Deruba was saying she's more than that. Yes, she's a woman, of course, but she's a part of a movement. And Assata, during the time she's involved in struggle, late 60s, early 70s, like so many women, actually saw firsthand the rise and development of the feminist movement. And many of them have said that it was very, very antagonistic towards men. White women were antagonistic towards white men. And even though patriarchy does exist within the Black community, Black women were not seeing Black men as their enemy. At that time, the view of feminism is that's a white woman's movement. We're not going to get down with that. Number one, we don't see Black men as our enemies. Number two, you are white. You are committed to white supremacy, and we're trying to tear it down. We're not going to join with you you're not trying to destroy white supremacy. Why would we join with you? Of course, that's the late 60s, early 70s. Again, this is in the beginnings. We know about decolonial feminism now. We know about third world feminism. We know about feminists of color from all over the world who are anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, but this was during that particular time period. So I think that was why Deruba stated what he stated in that portion of that letter.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that Deruba's response, it comes from a nationalist understanding too of saying, Black people have a historical project of our own liberation, right? That's the way that I read, what he's talking about there, and that Assata has chosen to be and remains a part of that project and sees it as a project of all Black people, right? And not a project where, which I think this is an important thing to delineate and talk a little bit about, right? Because there are feminisms, right, that would say, well, the primary contradiction in the world, the main thing that we need to be concerned about is the domination of men over women. And these other issues, whether race, class, etc., they don't necessarily dismiss them, right? Depending on what type of feminism we're talking about. But they're not the most important thing for me to organize. And I think, I know that this can be kind of mechanical, right? For folks to say like, well, what's this? But I think that, with regard to the New African movement, it is a choice to be in a specific kind of political movement. And that movement is about freeing the land. It is about the liberation of New African people. And I think that is an important political choice for someone to make. And I think that the piece, though, that is really important about a conversation like what Assata is doing with her comrades in Cuba here in 1993, though, is she's saying, yeah, I'm still a part of all that. That's why I'm meeting with you all to talk about things that you're worried about within your organization and share what I know and my experiences. And, we can talk about some ideas. Because within organizations, right, and within movements, there are still things that we have to figure out. How are we going to address these things to be able to really totally free ourselves, right? But also to make our movements even stronger, really, and to deal with some of the, she's talking about uneven distribution of labor here. She's talking about leadership, who can be a leader, who can't. She's talking about issues of social reproduction, like childcare, and that there's the assumption at one point that she should be doing cooking, and she talks about all the work that she has to do to keep from. And to be clear, again, she's not addressing that these are all things that she came upon within. She doesn't say like, this is stuff I dealt with within the New African movement. It's more of a broad discussion of her within various organizations that she's a part of. But I think it's interesting because part of what she's also doing is sitting with these sisters and saying, okay, well, what can we do to improve these conditions for Black women in our communities, right? It's partly organizational, but part of what she's also talking about is creating different kinds of structures and types of organizing that people can do to address.
Yeah, she's always talked about Black women have to organize themselves. And she says in one of her writings, participate in every area, every level of struggle. One of the things that she said that stood out to me in that conversation that's recorded in the book, she says sisters wanted to get involved in the movement. And because they came up against that patriarchy, they had devastating experiences. And it's something that I understood. How many Black women have been turned off from fighting for our liberation because of a wall of patriarchy that they came up against within an organization that said it's about our liberation. When she said that the experiences were devastating, it's like my heart sank. I know it was devastating. I know it was. And it's still devastating to this day. The experiences that people have because of their gender, because of their sexuality. Some might even say because of their class, being bullied. They're not black enough. They're not down enough. So yeah, she talks about organizational culture and how, and as Hiram said, even though that quote unquote Assata chant comes out of a larger context that people need to understand, it still comes back to how do we treat one another. We must love and protect one another because we all we got, as folks say out in the Bay Area, Oakland Bay Area.
Yeah. One of the pieces that I found really interesting is that she really digs into like socialization and psychology here, right? So she really
Mhm.
gets into, it's not something where her critique isn't a lazy critique or a simple critique, right?
Right.
It's not just like, hey, there's these men who are bad who are doing this to us, right? It's like they're socialized a certain way, we're
And so are
socialized
we.
a certain way, and
Mhm.
our own psychology also, because of that socialization, leads us to do certain things. Like and so like an example is let's see, there's this part. Well, she talks about, I mean, one of the things she does talk about is people trying to get in her drawers, right? And so she does talk
That's
about
still
that.
going on. Yeah.
Um, but one of the things is, so she says, well, wait a minute. So she's talking about when, after she's had a relationship with somebody and the political and the personal get, intertwined. So somebody thinks that she's going to be on her side because they had a past relationship or that sort of thing. And she said, we're talking about apples and you're talking about peaches. What is the point? Women are constantly confronted with these issues in our political work. If we don't say, look, these are the ethical ways that the sexes have to work together. Other things are not just personal things, but they are politically unethical. And for example, we were brainwashed. There's no question about it, because part of why the whole psychology of women is you are not educated to be the leader. You are not educated to go to, you are educated to
You
go
are
to bed
educated.
with the leader, to fall in love with the leader. The leader is your hero. Everybody is trying to get next to him this way and that way. There was a whole lot of that going on in all of us mentally. We were at a serious disadvantage in our relationships with men because we were confused about what we wanted also. She says it wasn't a question of just the men, it's a question of us too, because we accepted a lot of things that were clearly unprincipled because we were trying to get next to some dude. It was part of our psychology. Yeah, and she goes on. I mean, she talks about she talks about, differentiates herself from Elaine Brown, saying she wasn't into like free love or that kind of thing. But that she regrets that she did not take some of her relationships more seriously.
Patriarchy is a system of power. And like all systems, there are behaviors, there are actions that are encouraged and discouraged. Everything, I don't believe that everything can be traced. For example, well, the way we relate to each other is because of capitalism. Yeah, but it's also because of patriarchy, because of those same things that Assata listed out. And so, one of the things we have to do, we do as a movement, and we have to continue to do, we come to our struggle on our terms. How do we see our struggle? How do we see our way out of the struggle? It is not simply a struggle against capitalism. It is also against imperialism. It is also against patriarchy, not just sexism, but patriarchy, that whole, not some chauvinistic attitude, but the system that rewards that chauvinistic attitude, that system of power. Racism, sexism, we're talking about heteropatriarchy, that there is only one way to exist in the world. All of this is exacerbated under the economic system of capitalism. It's all exacerbated. And as we saw with the island of Cuba, it doesn't disappear overnight because the economic system has changed. It takes time because these are attitudes, thoughts, behaviors rooted in our psyche. It's going to take time to weed them out. The material basis for it may no longer exist. But we know, like Dr. W.B. Du Bois taught us in Black Reconstruction, there's a material wage and there's a psychological wage also. So it's going to take time. And we were having a discussion yesterday in Community Movement Builders. We were reviewing Eyes of the Rainbow, the wonderful film by Gloria Rolando on Assata Shakur. And we talked about the significance of the rainbow. We talked about the goddess Oya in the Orisha tradition, which is alive and flourishing and thriving on that Marxist-Leninist island of Cuba, socialist island of Cuba. Oya is the goddess of change. She's the goddess of revolution. Revolution is change. And if you notice in this work here and elsewhere, Assata always talks about we have to change ourselves. We've got to have that internal fight against, like she said, these psychological things that we carry with us. We've got to change ourselves. She talked about how she had to change herself when she had gone out to the Bay Area and had gotten so drunk that she was unable to get away from the police, and some Asian comrades had to lead her and somebody else out of the park. She's like, I got to really get myself together. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been listening to a bunch of different stuff from her. Should we play a little bit of this so people can hear her voice a little bit?
I'm following your lead.
Yeah. Let's play. First of all, I'll put the link. I need to add it right now, but I'll do that as we're playing a little bit. I'll put the link in the show description for folks so that they can, let's see.
So again, this was a cassette tape that was passed to me, and fast forward several years, I'm on the radio in Los Angeles, and I do a radio show one night called Revolution Without Women Ain't Happening. It's a audio tape of Aminata Umoja, also of the New African Women's Organization, New African Women's Task Force, in an address that she did. And it's also audio from that tape of Assata Shakur talking to the sisters. So because I aired it on the air, that's why it ends up in the book. Some of Us Are Brave, volumes 1 and 2, is primarily the work that I did on the radio as part of a Black Women's Radio Collective in Los Angeles. So I either directly interviewed people, or I was given other audio like that tape of Assata Shakur, and I broadcast it on the air. And I believe the link that you have, I broadcast it also on Black Liberation Media approximately 2 years ago, before we changed our name to Black Liberation Media.
Yep. I'm going to play it now, and I've added it to the show description too, so folks can go and listen to all of it. But I'm going to play a little section about this is what can we do, right? So this is kind of the next portion of what she's talking about.
And we are Black on the Liberation Hour with Angelique Kidjo and Assata Shakur, former member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, speaking to a delegation of the New African Women's Task Force in Havana, Cuba, in 1993 about her experiences in the movement. We continue now with the dialogue. Sister Assata was asked, what are some of the things that we can do to combat most of the ills she talked about?
So what's like the direction or guidelines in terms of, where we are today?
Well, I think that we have to stop. First of all, I think the first step toward changing something is to educate. And I think that the first people that we have to educate are ourselves. And I think that we have to go through and identify the different things that as political activists, women suffer. That the different things that women in our community suffer. And to start addressing those things, systematically, bit by bit by bit, so that we have an analysis. Because you can't, if you don't have an analysis of the problem, it's very difficult to educate. So, the first thing for us to do is I think, make an analysis of where we are. We've made some progress. Sisters are much more aware, thank goodness, than we were 10, 20 years ago. And we've got to start sharing that with each other, sharing that with younger sisters, writing about it, documenting what our struggle has been, and then trying to take it to another level. I think one of the problems that we have is being unorganized, because there are a lot of ways that sisters can be organized. I mean, it's not just, we can be organized in political organizations and like y'all in the task force, and I think that's very important. But I think there's a lot of survival organizing that we can do. We can get together in terms of child care collectives, whether it's in terms of healing collectives, whether it's in terms, and by healing collectives, I've heard some very positive things about healing collectives and some very negative, things that it comes to tell all and touchy feely and cry all day. I'm not talking about that. When I talk about healing collectives, I think it's important for us to get things that are in our systems out and some of the pain out. But I think that it's also, that's useless unless we do something. So I think that a lot, healing has to do with activity, because there's no, otherwise what's the point? You heal to do what? To stay a victim, to damn your daughters to the same situation that you're in. So if you're not actively doing something, then I think that in terms of changing reality, then the whole healing approach to things is fraudulent. When I say doing something, I don't mean any specific thing. Writing is doing something, speaking is doing something. There are all kinds of ways of activity, and I don't believe that there's any one way that people need to act, nor do I believe there's any one way that people need to organize. I think that in terms of pure survival, I think sisters need to organize collectives to support sisters who are homeless and to support each other in those kinds of things. I think that whether it's in terms of jobless sisters or there's so many ways that we can organize that we don't, and I think we just need to just analyze where we are and what we can do to reach out to other sisters,
All right, I'm gonna pause it there. But yeah, one, it's just great to bring her voice, into the space and into the conversation. And I encourage folks to listen to all of that. Sami Burton he mentioned this interview when we did our thing on Friday. There's one that she did with WBAI, I think that we put a SoundCloud file on, and I was listening to that, and it's her talking about her own, like how her own views and what has shifted from her time in Cuba. I think it was in like 87, or no, maybe it was a little bit later than that, but in that range, and talking about I guess Kikuya being in school and, just like a lot of different things from how she, both what the shift from moving from U.S. empire to a third world context and what you don't have, around you all the time, but also all of the positive developments she saw from, Cuban society, and even the ways that she even talked a little bit about how it made her rethink about race a little bit, although she said, we can't just think that we can apply the Cuban racial context to the United States racial context, or vice versa, that they're different historical experiences and everything. But yeah, I think it's beautiful for people to seek out those films and those interviews that she's done and hear from her. Was there other stuff in that section that we just played that stood out to you, Tandi?
Just that the fact that, going back to Daruba's letter that Orasami read, so many Black women, I know we're talking about Assata, but it was Assata and so many others of that time period up to today, so many Black women never call themselves feminists, do not identify as feminists, do not want to identify or be labeled as feminists. But if you look at their work, they are absolutely doing feminist work. If, as Mother Bell Hooks says, feminists wants freedom for everyone, liberation for everyone, they are working in their communities. They are caring for one another. They are fighting the power, fighting the police. They are loving each other. They are coming up with ways to love one another, protect one another, right? And they're doing it sometimes, many times within an all-female context, only organizing with other women or focusing on Black women, right? We're talking about Black women and Black women's spaces. So, I know Renee was concerned about who's going to be latching on to Assata now, who's going to try to appropriate her. There's always that attempt, but like with so many other attempts, there's an abundance of information on who Assata was and what she believed. As Hiram Rivera says, you got to read, beloved. If we read, we will know and be clear on who she was, what she believed, what she stood for. They can try as they might to appropriate her. We'll know the truth. And the truth is not so much, don't say Assata was a feminist. Assata is a revolutionary. Are you fighting for revolution? Or are you just fighting to have a label to be so that you can be adjacent or adjacent to her? What are you doing? What are you actually doing is the question and is the test.
Yeah, I think the piece that stood out to me in that section was that, she's thinking about organizing, she's thinking about programs, she's thinking about survival, and she's thinking about addressing things now, right? And she's not saying, which I hear from some folks sometimes, well, we can't really deal with that until we deal with this, that, and the other thing first. And this, that, and the other thing are things that are really hard to deal with, like how do we overthrow capitalism or something else, and so I guess what I would say in response or in addition to what you said, right, is that it's prefigurative work as well, right? She's thinking about how do we change how we socialize together in the community to be able to address some of the harms of what is going on. And she's not doing so in a way that's blaming the people in the community for the problems of the community. She's just saying, like, these are the issues that we have that are not, people don't have childcare, people don't, and so she's and homelessness. She brings up homelessness too, which I think is a really a very interesting, thing to hear her talking about in 93 and in that context as well. So yeah, I appreciate that. Another thing she talks about is homophobia, right? And I thought that was an interesting, kind of part of the discussion talking about how the difficulty also that she talks about. She says, you take a sister from one movement and she goes to a meeting and there's 30 lesbians in the meeting. Now she has no prior experience with lesbians and no clear political position about lesbian. Then she gets freaked out. And then there's the whole thing of, I don't want anybody to think I'm a lesbian, all this kind of stuff. But I think if you're really serious about dealing with the issue of struggling against homophobia, that you have to deal with that and not permit any sister to be, for lack of another word, gay baited. Because if somebody asked me if I'm gay, so what if I am? What's your point in asking me? You asking that to ask what? What does that have to do with the time of day? Do you want to go out?
You want to go out?
You know what I mean? And but she says, she's like, I've been in a situation because I'm always alone, or someone will say she's gay, and I've been thankful. It has been so much easier to work. But keep thinking that. Fine.
She's basically, the brothers will leave you alone if they think they ain't got no chance with you. Oh, she gay. She a lesbian. All right. I ain't gonna get nowhere with that. Let me leave her alone. which goes back to what she talked about earlier about folks trying to get into. She says people trying to get into her drawers. He said people were interested in her body. She had to get past that. Just trying to, sisters. She said their sisters have had experiences that were devastating. They come into an organization or to a movement to do work to free our people, and they have to put up with this nonsense. And the listening to her in '93, it reminds me of what I read in Toni Cade Bambara's book, The Black Woman. You know, you had a collection of essays. Some of them talked about the exact same thing. You know, she recounts, I think it was one of the essays that Toni recounted, or that Toni wrote. Some meeting was happening and a brother came in to talk about, yeah, y'all need to have babies, while he's doing trying to do some stretches in the meeting that, black women, y'all need to, and she said it was some sister from the community, didn't know she was drunk, homeless, or whatever, but just talked about him so bad, how raggedy he was and how he needed to shut the hell up with his toothless. It was, the way she recounts it is hilarious. Go read it for yourself. It's one of the essays in The Black Woman by Toni Cade Bambara. It's like, wow, these people are trying to kill us, and you trying to make me your seventh wife? What is wrong with you? That wasn't yeah, that was going on during that time. In some spaces it's going on today. Was that the entire breadth and depth of the movement? No, the point being it should not have been there, and that there are women who had been harmed. We don't have the luxury of turning people off from our fight to be free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a part at the end. I'm not going to read it all, but it's a.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, you got to catch me because I start talking. So the other part to that is, like she said, the word gay baited. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, she's like, think that about me so I can do this work. But at the other end of it, what business is it of this organization what I do? I told you I'm committed to Black people's freedom, and you have seen my work ethic, which is why you asked me to be a part of this organization or to take on greater responsibility. How are you going to? We don't have the luxury. We ain't got the numbers to decide who and can't be a part of this struggle. And you're going to base that on the fact of a person's sexuality? Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? Is that some warped version of talented tith, some puritanical talented tith? Is that what that is?
The puritanical piece comes in because she says, you know,
talking about morality.
Yeah, she gets into the point of morality, right? And she describes a kind of homophobic morality. And people said that, quote, if a man doesn't go to bed with another man and a woman doesn't go to bed with another woman, and you have sex after you get married and not before, then you're moral. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is the kind of morality that the right wing is trying to push. And we have the same morality, then we fall into a whole lot of traps, I think is what it should say there. But yeah.
How many of these mass shooters are married? Married with children, Christians. They've got the morality, right? And they're slaughtering people. I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say. I'm kick it back to you. Let me hush. I'm gonna kick it back to you.
You can say whatever you want here, Tandi. But
that sounds like do whatever it is you want to do, hurt whoever you want to hurt, steal whatever you want to steal, kill whoever you want to kill, and then on your deathbed, accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you can get into heaven. Really? Yeah. So don't change your behavior and be a good person. Do all the dirt you can, but before that last breath, accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and you'll be all right. Wow. Okay. I know I lost some
Yeah.
folk with that one. Okay.
No, it's fine. I mean, you're in good company here. I mean, I don't, you know,
Yeah.
I don't ascribe to this idea. I mean,
No,
I don't know.
yeah.
This and it's some of what she's talking about too. And is this notion, right, that a family structure or that gender roles have to fit into some kind of box, right? And that either that box is coming from some past that either is real or imagined, or it's coming from what the dominant society is actually telling you that you should do. And maybe Reagan and Bush, right, in this kind of era that we're talking about, are trying to tell you what you should. Bush Senior. Yeah. So, all right. So she kind of closes with violence against women, and basically talking to women about knowing how to fight, basically, is like what it comes down to.
In the Orisha tradition, you have these spiritual beings, these deities, etc., that are male or female. Sometimes they're interchangeable. They'll change their appearance or their orientation depending upon what's necessary. All of them are warriors, but all of them are not known for being a warrior. Oshun is the goddess of sexuality, of eroticism, of sweetness, of abundance, but she'll cut you. She's not known as a warrior in the war sense, but she can absolutely cut you. Yemaja is the mother, the nurturer, who takes care of us all, who loves us all, who raises all of the babies. Now, not to cross a mother over her children, right? So she can be a formidable warrior. She is a formidable warrior. But like I said, she's known as the nurturer. Oya, on the other hand, she the one. She the warrior. She's the absolute. She can be I know several Oya women. They are very, very loving. She is absolutely the one that's known as the warrior. Oya, one of the mother of Assata Shakur, she is one of her daughters. Again, that's why we talk about the eyes of the rainbow. She is the owner of the rainbow. She wears that multicolored skirt that she'll strap on just before she picks up her cutlass and puts on her combat boots and goes to take somebody's head. So when she says that it's not that hard for a woman to beat a man, because if you know a little something versus their arrogance, you can actually beat them. I was like, go ahead, mama. Go ahead. That is who Assata is. She is our absolute warrior queen mother.
Much appreciated. What else didn't we get to, Tandi?
I'm not sure. I think we got it. I think we got most of it.
I know. I'm just not used to. I know. I'm just not used to.
You're not used to wrapping up this quick.
I know. I'm not used to like being this on point and getting things done in around an hour. But
did you have more questions? I thought or did you get to all the questions?
I think we worked through them all. I mean, I guess. Well, so one of the things I didn't get to ask you actually was an earlier one. I did kind of skip around. You're right. You did say a little bit about it, but these two books come out through Daraja Press. Folks can get them. The links are in the show description. I'll make sure of that if they're not. And why don't you say a little bit about both of them? And also, I mean, you've given us some, but if not, you can also talk about the other book with Deborah Jones too, to give a little bit of context with that.
Well, also, I was speaking on Black Press USA this morning about Assata and her importance and the importance of the Black press. Also in that volume 2 is an interview I did with Nisa Islam Muhammad, who has been a writer for The Final Call for several years. And we talked about how she was in Cuba with a delegation of Black journalists. And she was hoping to run into Assata, and she was able to do that and interview Assata. And that interview she says it's out there available for folks to look up. The Final Call, Assata Shakur, Nisa Muhammad. But it was, she said that, she's Muslim, so she was asking people, asking around, is there a mosque I can go to? And does anyone know how I can get in touch with Assata Shakur? I'd love to interview her. Nobody had any information. She said she went back to her hotel room. I think it must have been a Thursday night because Friday is Juma. She says she got a phone call. The person did not identify themselves. The person said, well, did you find the mosque? She thought that was an interesting question. Yeah, I think I found it, blah, 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 blah. And then the person says, do you still want to interview Assata Shakur? And she was like, yeah, who is this? She said, it's me. Meet me tomorrow at 2:00 across the street from the hotel. She said she dropped the phone. She dropped the phone, then picked it back up again. Hello. Tomorrow at 2:00? Yes, tomorrow at 2:00. And before she goes to meet Assata, she's having all these questions like, oh my God, I mean, yeah, of course I want to interview Assata Shakur. Who wouldn't? But then again, why me? I'm just a little old girl that writes for the Final Call. You got all these other journalists here in the country. So when she meets up with Assata, that's one of the questions she asked her. She said, why me? She said, I trust the Final Call to tell my story. So shout out to the Final Call newspaper of the Nation of Islam. Regardless of what, Black folks have a love-hate relationship with the Nation of Islam. We already know this. But the Nation of Islam has had a consistently produced weekly newspaper for decades. A lot of folk can't say that.
No, and has, I think, pretty consistently been supportive of political prisoners and prisoners of war, historically, at least in covering, right, and in making sure that people knew what was going on when there's information that needs to get out and all that kind of stuff, all the way back. And I think, I mean, it's true.
So again, Some of Us Are Brave, volumes 1 and 2. We had a Black Women's Radio Collective in Los Angeles on the air on KPFK from 2003 till about 2011, 8 years. And we called the show Some of Us Are Brave. And it was differing numbers of sisters at different times. But I made sure to keep copies of everything that I did, every interview I did, whether I can find it in my house now or not. I was telling you about that earlier. I don't know where they are. Some of them are, but the ones I had my direct hand on, I said, this type of information needs to be put out there. You see Assata talking about we need to document, right? I said, I'm going to put these in a book. And so Some of Us Are Brave is made up of several things. It is interviews that I have personally conducted, or it is audio that I personally captured and broadcast on the air, or audio that I was given, broadcasted on the air, or audio that I personally recorded but didn't make it on the air. One of the volumes, I forget which one of the volumes has Barbara Ransby speaking in Atlanta when her book on Ella Baker first came out. She gave me permission to record it. I don't remember why, but for whatever reason, I never got to air it, but the transcript is there in the book. There were several years ago, between 2000 and 2006, maybe, Ramona Africa came to Los Angeles to speak. I had a hand in bringing her to Los Angeles, and I introduced her to the crowd. The transcript of that is in the book. It didn't make it onto the air. At the time, I did not have the actual audio because I was busy working on the programming, but transcript of that. So again, this is a book that has interviews with Black women that I have my hand is somewhere involved in it. 2-volume work from Daraja Press. Now, the other work.
Can I ask you a question about it before we go to the other one?
Yeah.
I know you interview a lot of different types of people, like people with different politics, like you have so how do you, I've always appreciated someone listening to your interviews. How do you approach it when there's folks that you have like political disagreements with, or questions that you have about their politics that maybe you want to try to bring to the fore? And how do you approach that?
That's a whole nother discussion that we should have about journalism and objectivity, right? But be that as it may, because I'm on KPFK is not an all-black station. It's not an all-black. It ain't a revolutionary station. It ain't an all-black station. So I understand the audience, and I understand what it is they want to hear about. I've on Black Liberation Media, there are times when I've posted my local show. I call it KPFK Local, where we're dealing with the local concerns, not just of the Black community in Los Angeles, but what's happening in LA County or Southern California or the state of California. So I have a variety of audiences because of, at the time, what it is that I'm attempting to do or get across, or, who I'm attempting to highlight a lot of grassroots organizations. Yes, they're nonprofit in the Los Angeles that are working to dismantle the men's jail, for example. They're working on the California budget. They're working around homelessness or houselessness. So, but I will absolutely not give a platform to anyone who is just obviously reactionary, just obviously a racist, because I'm dealing with radio, I'm dealing with FCC. The licenses of the stations will be in jeopardy if I cuss them motherfuckers the fuck out. If I can't I can do that on Black Liberation Media and on this platform. I can't do that on radio. I will cuss all objectivity out the window. You motherfucker, you. There would be no Charlie Kirk on Route. No, it would be a 3-hour cuss fest. Just me. I'd turn off the mic and just cuss, 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 cuss. You can't have that on the radio. You can't do that. So I know thyself. I know me. I know which guests to avoid and which guests I can work around.
Yeah, no, I appreciated it. And I think that's an important thing too. Like you said, like you thinking about the audiences of what you're doing, and doing stuff within a local context. Also, it has a different, there's a different flavor that you have to have to it also, because it's real people that you have to interact with and think about their concerns and their interests and what their expectations are of the type of programming you do and all of that. Appreciated. All right. So let's talk about the other book.
So what we stood for, the story of a revolutionary Black woman, is Deborah Jones's account of her life and what happened to her Mother's Day weekend of 1970, and what happened to her or her life after that. What happened to her Mother's Day weekend of 1970 is that she and one other sister, who were members of the US organization at the time, were held for 3 days over that weekend and assaulted and tortured and beaten. Deborah says under the orders of Maulana Karenga, the founder of the US organization. It took place, or the majority of the torture happened at the hands of others. She says that Maulana Karenga was present and took part in a bit of the torture, not all of it, but it absolutely came, she says, under his direction. Approximately 1 year later, he went on trial along with his wife, Tia Moyo, and 2 other members of the organization. They were found guilty. He was sentenced to 10 years in a California state prison, paroled after 4. And so it talks about her upbringing, being a Black girl in Los Angeles, Black, coming of age as a Black woman, going to Fremont High School, and being a young age and knowing and seeing Bunchy Carter and other members of the Panthers, but also seeing the US organization and being attracted to African culture the way it had been presented to her. She loved to dance, and so she joins the organization through their dance troupe, the Taifa dance troupe, Taifa meaning nation in Swahili. And so she is around 17 or 18 at the time, and then takes off with the dance troupe for about a year, traveling around the country. So she doesn't actually see the inner workings of the organization until she comes back. By the time she comes back, 68 or 69, the organization is in chaos and turmoil because of COINTELPRO, the murders of Bunchy and John. So the dance troupe was disbanded, and it became like an all hands on deck situation. So now she's part of the organization's day to day. And she says, I'm seeing things I don't like. I don't like the way the women are treated. I don't like the way people do not challenge Chimurenga, just accept what he says. And it doesn't make any sense. There's no accountability. And she says that is what put her on his radar and what leads up to Chimurenga accusing her and one other woman, Idili, of being agents attempting to assassinate him. And then it talks about her life afterwards, the trauma, because of the trauma she endured, the PTSD. We said in the book, I don't think rape counseling had been available in 1970, 71. Rape crisis centers, I don't think come on the scene until maybe 74, I'm not sure. And then she talks about how if psychiatry or, going to a therapist had been offered to her, she doesn't know if she would have accepted it, because at that time of the stigma around getting mental health, and she's attempting to go about her life as best she can, but it's a struggle because of the trauma that she endured. She meets a man who is very loving and loves her to death, and they get together. She has a baby. And she eventually tells the man, here, you raise this baby because I'm going to hell and I don't want to take her with me. She talks about, and I had a chance to talk to her ex-husband. Unfortunately, he passed away while we were working on the book. But I had a chance to talk to him before he passed away, because even though this is her memoir, this is her story, as a journalist, you have certain questions. But it's not my job to fact check. She said what she said. And as a writer, I'm helping her to get her story in shape and to get it published. But it's not my job to fact check her. But you, as a journalist, you still have questions like, So she told me that the first time that she and Perry, that's her first husband, made love, when she undressed, he saw the scars on her back from where she had been tortured. And he wanted to get dressed right then and there and go find the person that did it. And I called him and asked him about that. And he said, yeah, I wanted to go and get him. But she told me he was in jail. Don't even worry about it. I was like, wow. So it's a very personal story. Heartbreaking story. It takes her years to get, quote unquote, back on her feet. There are instances of joy. Of course, it's a story of resilience. Instances of joy. She's got an interesting life. Just so many of us have. My life is boring as hell. So many folks have interesting lives. I was like, Deborah, that did not happen. That did not happen. She said, yes, it did, Deborah. And then there was this one thing. I was like, Deborah, did you forget to tell me about this? Oh, yeah, I did. Okay. This book came about as a result of an oral history project that I work with. The Tom and Ethel, I'm talking about Deborah's book. The Tom and Ethel Bradley Center at California State University, Northridge, they have what is called a Black Power Archive, where we've been interviewing Black Power activists in the city of Los Angeles, members of the Black Panther Party, etc. Those who served under Bunchy Carter, like Taliba Shakir, etc. So that's how we get Deborah's, that's how Deborah is interviewed. That's how I'm put in touch with her to do the book. One of the people we interviewed was a brother by the name of Kabaila. Kabaila joined the organization in about 67, I think. Us organization begins in 65. First Kwanzaa's in 66. Kabaila joins either in 66 or 67. So, of course, the journalist in me, right? I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get to ask Kabaila about Deborah to confirm. That's the little, I'm trying to keep the journalist within me from coming out, but just a little thing. So we're interviewing Kabaila. I said, Kabaila, do you remember Deborah at all? Is there anything you can tell me about Deborah? He says, yeah, I think she was head of the women's security arm. So we've got the oral history interview that Deborah did. And now that I'm working with her to tell a story, I'm interviewing her separately, have a series of interviews, questions I ask her, blanks I'm trying to fill in. So I called Deborah up and I said, Deborah, is there something you forgot to tell me? She said, probably. Anything having to do with the Matamba, the women's wing of the US organization? She said, oh, yeah, I was the head of that. Deborah. So, we're not going to be able to get everything in a book. No book is going to have everything. But it's the process of putting together a book that is so eye-opening and enriching, But that's what that's a long answer to say that's what that book is. Put out by, I forgot my other publisher's name. He's going to be mad at me. Anyway, What We Stood For, Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman. That's Deborah Jones' story, but I helped her co-write it. And again, I wanted to call the book, this was my suggestion, I was overruled. I wanted to call the book something about they don't know our names or they don't know my name. And the reason I said that is because every year in December, every year during Kwanzaa season, people come out to repudiate Kwanzaa by attacking Karenga. And they always say, well, he tortured two sisters, right? You know about them two sisters, right? Well, who are these two sisters? What are their names? And no one ever knew what their names were. Nobody ever said what their name. Nobody knows my name. That was what I wanted to call it at first. Nobody knows my name. And it wasn't until Scott Brown's book, Fighting for Us, in 2003, 2005, where he actually said what their names were. Gail Davis and Deborah Jones. As a matter of fact, I'll quit. I'll hang it up in a second. This oral history project, we interviewed a brother by the name of Kumasi, who was in Folsom Prison and helped author the Folsom Manifesto, which is what had been circulating throughout the prison system and got to the brothers in Attica and influenced their declaration just after George Jackson had been assassinated. I wasn't part of it, but Kumasi was being interviewed for the oral history project. And he said, you know who you guys should interview? You should interview Deborah Jones. And the folks were like, well, who's Deborah Jones? Oh, that's the one Karenga tortured back. You know Deborah Jones? He said, yeah, she be going to the Slauson picnic every year. You want me to put her in touch with you? And that's how that started. So.
Amazing. So the publisher
it's the stories behind the stories that are just as entertaining and impactful as the story. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the publisher, I will shout them out, is Diasporic Africa Press, just so folks know. And
sorry about that, bro. Sorry about that, brother.
So I have linked in the show description where folks can find root work on YouTube on Black Liberation Media. But do you want to say a little bit more just about that? And then I guess one thing to say too is if people aren't watching it, it's not getting the numbers that it should. Watch your show, but you've been doing the series with Kali Akuno too pretty regularly on the
build and fight
stuff.
formula from Cooperation Jackson.
Yeah.
So build and fight is practical things that movements, organizations, communities need to be doing in this time period. We need to be building and fighting. Kali has been, I'm not going to call him well, of course he is a truth teller. I'm not going to say he's a soothsayer. I don't know why that word came up, but this is what these people doing. This is what's about to happen. He's like, some folks like, okay, y'all don't believe me. Okay, you're going to look up. That's what did Malcolm say? You're going to look up and you're going to be in them ovens, right? That's what Kali has been doing for a few years. But he's also been working with others in conjunction with Cooperation Jackson to come up with a formula to fight back. And so we do that once a month, usually if not the first Tuesday, the second Tuesday on Black Liberation Media. It's called the Build and Fight Formula, as presented by Cooperation Jackson.
Yeah. Any other places people can find you?
Root work on Black Liberation Media, sometimes on KPFK. I don't get out a lot to do enough visual stuff for Instagram, but I try to. Basically, because I'm old, I have built community on Facebook. That's where I do the majority of my ranting and raving. I know the young folks ain't into Facebook. Oh, well. But yeah, that's where I do my ranting and my raving. But I am on Instagram. I had to flee from Twitter. I occasionally post, updates and things I think people need to know on Twitter, not X, but Twitter. But yeah, that once ADOS and FBA, which are trash, by the way, once they came on the scene, I got to leave Twitter alone. This place is crazy. It's unreal. They trash. They're trash. ADOS and FBA are trash. That's why you're laughing. They trash. Trash.
I'll let you handle that fight, and you and Dr. Ball and Renee.
Trash.
I'll leave that. I'll stay out of my business. I'll stay in my business for that one at least.
You gonna stay out of black folks' business?
just on that one.
Got you.
Clearly, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Tandi, this has been great. Much appreciated. By the way, the audience is all types of, they are trash.
No, not just trash. Absolute. What did Gil Scott Heron saying? Garbaggio. Just oh my god.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah. I don't disagree.
I
don't. And then the other thing, I just wanted to shout out Steven. Thank you for becoming a member of the channel. Appreciate the support. As always, it's been good to see everybody in the chat. You've been very lively and definitely enjoying the conversation.
I didn't even go over there. I was like, I don't want to, it'll get me distracted. I'm just going to let you handle the chat.
Yeah, well, I didn't do a very good job of handling it, but much appreciated for all of you for tuning in and offering your commentary and listening to us talk about this. And please, go listen to that interview. You can listen to it on the link, which is now in the show description. Armchair Marxican, thank you for the super chat as well.
Basura. Garbaggio, basura, trash.
People say more where Tandi collabs if possible. Let's do it. We can do some more. I always enjoy talking to you.
What is it? I sent you a text message Saturday to thank you for the show you did with Hiram and Orisanmi and Jared and Renee. And you hit me back, yo, I was just about to text you. I was like, no, you wasn't. Stop lying. No, you wasn't. He was like, no, really, I wasn't. Yeah, okay, all right, whatever.
Well, I told you why. So some of the folks, I'm not going to drop her last name, but I'll drop her name so that if she listens to this, she can hear it if she stays to the end. But Arlene, who is a comrade that both of us know, and that some other folks that I know too, she is the person who hit me up afterwards, and she was like, hey, I don't know if you saw me in the chat, but you should reach out to Thandisizwe. She has this interview on this specific topic, and it's a good, I think she said supplement, and that's the way I would phrase it too myself, is I think it's a good supplement. It's not that I don't see what she is saying as contradicting what Deruba said in his statement. I just see her, it's addition. It's like, yes, and right. Like, all of that is true, and yet we still have these practical matters that we have to work towards. And so I really appreciated reading it. It's a different context than a lot of times I think people come across stuff from Assata, because a lot of what we have for media from Assata, you do have obviously the autobiography. We have these sometimes political statements that she's making, in the context of struggle and, her escape and all of that. But then you also have, interviews, which are often from a kind of like, she's being interviewed by people who she's trying to talk about her situation. She's trying, like it's a different kind of, it's for a public audience. This is for an audience of her comrades, right? And other Black women, and them having a conversation among themselves. And I mean, in some ways, it's also like reading it, I was like, oh, should I even be seeing this on some level, right? Because I'm not the intended audience for it, right? But I think it's important for people to have these perspectives to get a fuller sense, right, of who she is and what her politics were and how she embodied those in different spaces that she was in. And so I think it's beautiful. Zenzabel, also thank you for the super chat. People are
throwing all this money around. Send me $10.
People, watch Root Work on Black Liberation Media with Thandisizwe and send some. Do you have Patreon?
I don't have a Patreon.
I've been struggling.
I've been struggling deciding what I'm going to do with a Patreon or a Substack. Yeah, just
All right, Tandi, I will talk. We'll talk offline and we'll figure out. You need to buy me a coffee. You need something. You need something for people to be able to drop you some tips for.
Well, I do have a Cash App and a Venmo.
There you go.
I definitely have that. Other than the books, the books are a physical document, but other than the books, I struggle with asking for remuneration for this work, for my writing. I don't really want to, have you subscribe to my writing. I'm just saying I have issues with it. Now I'll ask you for $5 just because. I ain't got no problem with that.
What's your Cash App, Tandi?
Cash App Root Work. Look up Root Work. It probably is it ROOTWRK, not WORK. WRK. And it's root, not root.
I know, I say it wrong.
How my mama from Arkansas would say. She said roots.
I'm socialized. Roots. I'm socialized to say roots. So
I know. I got you.
All right. Tandi, this was wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time. I always enjoy talking with you. And I hope that folks got as much out of it as I did. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Shout out to Arlene for putting it in your ear. Shout out to you for hearing it and bringing me on. Appreciate it.
And I should say part of it too is I know this is why I've been avoiding is like I know I owe Tandi some conversations because you put out all these books and I haven't. I know you haven't been goofing off. It's all good.
It's
not just you. Like there's a whole line of people that are pissed at me right now because I haven't read their books and had them on. So you're in good company in that way.
We ain't gonna talk about books that need to be. We ain't gonna go there. No, not with me. We not. I'll keep my mouth shut.
All right. Thanks again.